the memory of the 4th of July celebration will always stick in my mind as a disastrous holiday. We guys are often taught to endure mistreatment, love without conditions, and take the high road when things go awry in our relationships with women. But this incident crossed a line for me. It shattered something within me because I truly loved my wife. I cried. There have only been a few instances in my life that brought tears to my eyes, mostly related to loss, but this pain was different. Let's dive into the story, although I apologize if I don't follow the usual narrative structure. This is more of a therapeutic outlet for me, and healing takes time. I've been married to my wife for 4 years now. We're still relatively new to marriage, but we dated for 2 years before tying the knot. Our relationship appeared strong with no signs of trouble. Our love was genuine, and we built a foundation of trust during our courtship. I'm 30 years old, and she's 26. The incident that brought my wife's cheating to light occurred on July 4th during a party organized by my wife's friend. Let me give you a bit of context before delving into the incident itself. About a week before July 4th, my wife had mentioned that her close friend wanted us to join her July 4th celebration. We usually have a reliable babysitter for our 3-year-old, and we usually inform the sitter in advance about our babysitting needs. Leading up to this specific 4th of July event, my wife informed me that she had contacted the babysitter, who mentioned her schedule would be packed and she couldn't make it. I was a bit disappointed because spending time with my wife had become rarer since we had our baby. My wife expressed her strong desire to attend the event and suggested that I stay home with our child while she goes to her friend's party. I wanted her to have fun, so I agreed and said I'd take care of our child at home. Now here's the twist. My wife knew I wasn't exactly a big fan of her friend. Her friend is still single, and while my wife is 26 years old, her friend is 3 years younger and a bit more carefree. I don't want to come across as controlling, especially since my wife is an adult. I simply advise her to watch out for her friend because she might not be the best influence. Now, on the morning of July 4th, I took an unusual step and decided to call the babysitter myself. Normally, my wife handles these arrangements, and I had to find the sitter's number on my wife's phone. My thinking was that if I offered the babysitter a higher hourly rate, she might change her mind and agree to take care of my child that evening. If it works out, I plan to surprise my wife and let her know we could go to the event together after all. I wanted to share the news with her once I had the babysitter situation sorted out and enjoy the satisfaction of pulling off a last-minute miracle. Things started to unravel when I called the babysitter and asked her to reconsider sitting for my son that evening, even though she had initially declined. She appeared surprised when I used the word reconsider and told me it was the first time I had asked her about that day. Her surprise caught me off guard too, and I inquired if she remembered my wife calling her to arrange the evening a week earlier. She confirmed she hadn't received any call from my wife. I quickly improvised and told her that my wife had actually called a family member instead. That's when it became clear to me that my wife had lied for some reason, although I couldn't figure out why. It was definitely a cause for concern. I arranged for the sitter to come to our house at 10 p.m., and my wife mentioned she would be leaving around 8 p.m. for the event. Before ending the call with the sitter, I made sure to tell her not to inform my wife about her coming over. I explained that I wanted to surprise my wife and keep the outing I had planned a secret. I almost stumbled over my words when the sitter reminded me that I had mentioned my wife's earlier attempt to secure the date and time. I managed to cover it up by saying that we both thought the date night might have been canceled, but since she was on board, it would still be a nice surprise. As scheduled, my wife left around 8 p.m. I waited patiently for the sitter, who arrived on time. Once she was there, I headed to the party my wife had mentioned. Honestly, I had a suspicion that she might not show up and go somewhere else instead. But to my surprise, she was indeed at the party. Her friend greeted me as I arrived. Seeing me there surprised her, and she quickly called my wife over. It's an understatement to say she was just shocked. Her reaction was more like utter disbelief. It had only been around 3 hours since my wife left home, but she already seemed quite intoxicated. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her reception towards me was chilly. She repeatedly asked why I was there and who was taking care of our child. I reassured her that I had the babysitter situation under control and that she shouldn't worry. I just wanted us to enjoy the evening together and watch the fireworks display. The party itself was in a medium-sized setting, with maybe 15 to 20 people squeezed into the house. One thing that stood out to me, though, was the gender ratio. There were noticeably more guys than girls, almost like a 2-to-1 ratio. We managed to move past the awkward initial interaction, but that still didn't explain why my wife had been deceptive about the outing. The event seemed to revolve around a game night, with a focus on playing risque truth, or dare games. I overheard one of the guys suggesting they get back to the game. I decided it was time to catch up on what I had missed, and joined in with the friendly group of guys. These were the ones who were quite talkative, either due to the drinks flowing, or just their outgoing personalities. Amidst the gathering, my wife's behavior became agitated and uneasy, and she expressed her desire to leave and go home. Her sudden request to leave raised a red flag for me, suggesting that she was definitely hiding something. I assured her we could head home, but I asked for a moment to try some of the drinks since I had just arrived. I headed to the kitchen and struck up a conversation with one of the guys there. After introducing myself to a random guy, I inquired if he was enjoying the party. He introduced himself as well and confirmed that he was indeed having a good time. I told him I was interested in making a move on one of the girls at the party, but I wasn't sure who was available. I began pointing to the different girls one by one, and he helped me identify who was already in a relationship and who seemed open to approach. Using this approach, I eventually pointed to my wife without revealing her identity to the stranger. I then asked him what he thought about her. He mentioned that my wife was attractive, but he warned me that she was off limits because she arrived with a guy he knew as a friend. I pretended to be interested and asked him to share more details about this guy. The stranger went on to give me information about my wife's affair partner, explaining that they had met at a concert and had been involved with each other intimately since then. This revelation really hit me hard. The timeline of when my wife attended the concert and met this guy matched up perfectly. This struck a chord because I was also present at that very same concert. What bothered me was the fact that I was with her most of the time during the event, except when she wanted to get some snacks and insisted on going alone. I recall that it took her an unusually long time to return with her snacks, but I brushed it off, assuming there was a long line or she needed to use the restroom. This incident happened about a month prior, and ever since then she had been frequently leaving the house and even had a trip out of town. This new information left me questioning everything. The stranger was bragging about my wife as if she were some kind of prize he'd won for his friend. He kept on talking, sharing a few more details. He explained that he had come to the party to pursue my wife's friend, whom he described as a free spirit. I wasn't sure if my reaction was noticeable, but I couldn't fake it anymore. Just then, my wife's friend joined the conversation, possibly realizing that my questions were leading to the truth about my wife's affair. However, it was too late, and I could tell that she was also part of the deception. I excused myself from the conversation but asked my wife's friend about my wife's whereabouts. She suggested checking the patio, and that's where I found my wife talking to the guy. It seemed like they were either having a heated discussion or she was trying to convince him of something. I approached them and introduced myself to the man who was involved with my wife. But before I could say anything to him, my wife hastily pulled me away, insisting that we should leave the party. I swatted her hand away with anger and told her she could leave because I wanted to have a talk with the man. I confronted him directly, introducing myself as her husband. I asked him straightforwardly if he knew my wife was married before getting involved with her, considering I had already discovered the truth about their relationship. I have a somewhat imposing presence that I use to my advantage in confrontations. Honestly, I wasn't looking to fight him if he genuinely didn't know she was married. My little show of subtle aggression was meant to let my wife know that I had uncovered her infidelity and to unsettle the guy a bit. I repeated my question to him, making it clear that I didn't want to ruin the party by starting a brawl, but I needed to know if he was aware of my wife's marital status before getting involved with her. My wife was getting anxious and tried to hold me back while apologizing. The guy, seeing the bottle in my hand and realizing he was cornered on the patio with no support, fell for my act and started apologizing as well. He mentioned that he didn't intend to cause any trouble and that he had only started talking to my wife without knowing she was married. I inquired about the number of times they had been together, and he gave a response. I simply wished him a good night and walked away. I hopped in my car and drove back home. I told my wife that I wanted a divorce. I checked into a hotel where I'm writing down my story as a form of self-therapy. I'm feeling lost about what steps to take. This is my first experience with divorce, and I'm completely unfamiliar with co-parenting since I didn't grow up in a household like that, What I do know is that I can't bear the thought of seeing that woman, and this incident is making me physically sick. I'll probably provide updates on what my next moves will be, but for now, I'm truly uncertain. Story 2. My wife was 35 years old, and I was 36 when she got wind of an upcoming high school reunion. We lined up a babysitter for the night and were genuinely looking forward to it. I might not have known any of her old classmates, but the idea of mingling with her friends from back then was thrilling. I first crossed paths with my wife in a bar situated on the same street where we both worked. She was a hairdresser, and I was employed at a print shop. The first thing that caught my eye was her stunning hair. And then I glimpsed her eyes, and I knew right then that she was going to captivate me for a long time to come. Her opening line to me was about needing a haircut, but that's a tangent. We tied the knot and welcomed 2 children into our lives. Our marriage had its imperfections, and there were instances when we thought about taking some time apart. But whenever it came to actually packing our bags, neither of us could go through with it. There was no cheating going on at that point, so it felt like every disagreement or issue could be resolved with communication and effort. Isn't that how marriages are meant to work? Our kids enjoyed a wholesome childhood, never having to overhear heated arguments. They were 13 and 16 when we began preparing to attend her high school reunion. About 2 weeks before the reunion, my wife went on a Facebook spree, adding a bunch of her high school buddies. Among them were a few guys, although most of them were also married. I didn't suspect anything fishy until the sound of constant dings filled the air. Throughout our time at home together, her phone was constantly chiming. I swear I even heard it while I was in the shower or on the toilet. It went off while she was cooking dinner and even when we were saying goodnight to the kids. The excessive notifications were becoming a bit too conspicuous, and she knew it. So I finally mustered up the courage to ask her who was texting her so incessantly. Her response? It was just old high school friends catching up. Fair enough. She switched her phone to vibrate mode and suddenly the messages seemed to stop. But one night after she had fallen asleep, I heard that faint buzzing sound again. I stared at the ceiling for a good half hour before I caved in. What I read in those messages was unsettling. It was a back and forth between her and one of the guys who would be at the reunion. In one message, she mentioned how excited she was to see him again, and how wonderful it would be. In another, she questioned whether he had changed over the years compared to when they were young. He replied that, unfortunately, he could only have that kind of fun with her. She responded by saying they might have some fun at the reunion or afterward. He then pointed out that it seemed like she wanted to keep seeing him even after the reunion, and she didn't deny it. Well, I decided to have a serious talk with her about it, and she was quick to offer a heartfelt apology. She explained that he seemed lonely and in need of friends. I wasn't having any of it though, and I made it clear that this wasn't an excuse for their discussions about having fun or continuing their interactions after the reunion. I went further and inquired about whether they had ever been physically intimate in the past, to which she denied. She didn't appear to be lying back then, but now that I know what I do, I'd say she was definitely not telling the truth. She asked if we could still attend the reunion and I cautiously agreed, thinking that she hadn't entirely broken my trust at that point. I figured I'd be there to keep a close eye on everything. Little did I realize, she kept on conversing with that man. Perhaps even more than before. She made sure to get her hair and nails done before the big night out. During that eventful night, the man took a few minutes to muster the courage to reintroduce himself to my wife, all while I stood by her side. The vibe I got from him was uneasy, like he could hardly look me in the eyes, and I could tell he was desperate to reconnect with my wife. She returned his gaze, but there was an added layer of care about me. She introduced me in a friendly manner, but he wasn't fazed. He managed to position himself close enough to keep the conversation going with her. Throughout the evening, everyone was indulging in drinks except for me. By the time I needed to use the bathroom, my wife was visibly drunk. I let her know I'd be back in a jiffy, but when I returned, both she and he were nowhere to be found. I looked around and asked one of the women from the reunion where they had gone. She mentioned they had stepped outside for a cigarette. Now, my wife wasn't a smoker, but I speculated that she might have gone out to keep him company. I stepped outside, scanning the area, but they were nowhere in sight. I even checked the interiors of all the cars in the parking lot. When I called her cell phone, she didn't pick up. I was both baffled and frustrated. I waited around for 45 minutes until I finally received a text message from her. It said she had gone along with the man to the nearby gas station, but since they were close to our house, he planned to drop her off there. I knew she was feeding me a load of crap. I got home about 30 minutes later to find that the babysitter had left, and our kids were sound asleep. My wife was on the couch, in just her underwear, also asleep. I woke her up right away and demanded an explanation. She seemed really out of it, but deep down, a part of me suspected she might be pretending. She mumbled something incomprehensible, attempting to explain that he had offered her a ride home because he wanted to talk about his own troubles. It was impossible to get any coherent information from her in that state, so I decided to wait until the morning to try and make sense of things. Before my wife woke up, our teenagers filled me in on their evening with the babysitter. I could barely concentrate, but it was a relief that they were already asleep when she got home, so they didn't witness anything unusual. Once my wife was awake, I wasted no time and questioned her about the events. She griped about her fuzzy memory and expressed strong regret for leaving me there and for getting so intoxicated. Really sorry. After a few hours, she had an emotional breakdown and confessed that she had remembered what actually transpired. It seemed like she somehow sensed that I would discover the truth. She disclosed that he had asked her to step outside and talk, and she agreed. He suggested they get into his car because it was chilly, and she didn't perceive any harm in that. Then she revealed that he had coerced her into kissing and having closeness. Tears streamed down her face, though I suspected it was more due to being caught. I insisted on checking her phone, and she hesitated and tried to make excuses. I snatched the phone from her and retreated to the bathroom to examine it, and guess what? She had found the time to message the man and admit that their actions were a mistake. But even before that, messages from days before the reunion showed they had plotted to sneak away at some point, engage in physical activity, and even contemplated the possibility of her spending the night at his place. This was the final straw. Our marriage had reached its end. As I swung open the bathroom door, she stood there, pale as a ghost, staring at me like her entire existence was on the line. I let her know in no uncertain terms that it was over, that I couldn't continue with her after finding out about her calculated betrayal. Her tears flowed and she begged for my forgiveness in a barely audible voice. I reminded her that even though she was intoxicated when it happened, she had planned this affair in advance. She had chosen to shatter the trust we had built over all those years. My resolve to shield her as my wife crumbled because she had willingly let another man into our life. I didn't think she could feel any lower. But my words managed to drag her further down. She curled up into a ball, her sobs echoing through the room, while I went about doing her a few favors. I arranged for the kids to spend the night at their friend's place, hoping to shield them from the traumatic events. I collected as many of my wife's belongings as I could, neatly packing them away. I called her parents and explained the situation, suggesting they come and take their daughter back home. And they did just that. Despite her resistance or inability, I helped her into their car, along with her belongings. Her parents attempted to apologize and engage in conversation, but I barely acknowledged them, offering nothing more than a greeting and farewell. My wife made a few attempts to step out of the car, but they warned her that if she didn't leave with them right then, they wouldn't provide her a place to stay until she found an alternative arrangement. The weight of their words sent her into a daze. She understood that her life as she knew it had come crashing down. She remained motionless, resembling a statue, as they drove her away. During the divorce and custody hearings, she kept her tears as quiet as she could. Our teenagers opted to live with me, staying in the same house and going to the same school. To her credit, she owned up to her mistakes and tried her best to co-parent with me. Now that several years have gone by, we're at a point where we can at least be friendly. I'm grateful every day that I didn't force myself to stay with her and attempt to mend things. It could have been a lot more painful for me, and probably easier for her. She made her choices, and I willingly followed a different path. She struggled with it at every step, but perhaps that's what she deserved. Despite moving out multiple times, she's still living with her parents, unable to find stability since this all unfolded. I, on the other hand, got remarried about a year ago, and my new wife is remarkable and trustworthy so far. Sharing my experience is important to give hope to others grappling with their own harrowing life changes. My child's mother betrayed me by having an affair with my best friend. Back when we were just dating, I had no clue that she was meeting up with my best friend at 5 in the morning to hit the gym. After my work shifts in the afternoon, my friend and I would work out together. Interestingly, she would sometimes show up there unexpectedly and focus on me, barely acknowledging my friend. Whenever we hung out with friends at restaurants or bars, she'd shower me with attention and affection in front of everyone, sticking close to me. However, if I got up to order a drink or use the restroom, I'd return to find them deep in conversation, and they'd immediately change their behavior when I approached. Since my sister accused me of dominating conversations, I figured I was being overbearing and not giving them space to talk. So whenever I noticed this, I simply trusted them both completely. They both shared an interest in astrology and were thrilled that their zodiac signs matched as Virgos. Eventually, I grew uncomfortable with the direction the relationship was taking, so I decided to end it. She was persistent about us getting back together, putting in a lot of effort. She'd come over to my apartment after my work shifts, trying to seduce me. She'd be dressed in sexy lingerie and wouldn't leave until she satisfied me. However, things took a strange turn with my friends. My best friend started avoiding hanging out, and I noticed the rest of the group excluding me from their plans. I asked my buddy what was going on, why I wasn't being invited anymore, and he'd say it was all last-minute planning and they assumed I'd be busy. Later on, another friend revealed that he would tell the group he wanted to invite me, but then tell them I was too busy to join. He never reached out to me. Instead, he contacted my ex and invited her. She was excited to go drinking and clubbing with the group, and him every time. My best friend excluded me from events so he could invite my ex as his date in the group. Despite all the ongoing drama for months, she's putting in a lot of effort to get us to date again, doing all she can, and he's just enjoying the ride for now. I'll admit I'm not the strongest guy, and despite all the headaches she brought, I'd still fall for her visits because I knew she was up for some fun. Eventually, I wisened up and realized her constant presence was just giving me temporary satisfaction while preventing me from meeting new girls. I took a trip out of town for a few months to break the toxic cycle, but after a whole summer, I figured out that I genuinely enjoyed her company and should be open to compromises. We had been together for 2.5 years, so we already knew each other well. After months of not talking, I approached her and asked if we could start anew. She was really upset, somehow knowing that I had been dating someone else while we were broken up. I had no idea how she found out. At this point, I still didn't know that she and my best friend were hanging out the whole time. I made sure to keep my personal matters private to avoid disrupting my life in case this new attempt didn't work out. However, she oddly guessed many things about me with surprising accuracy. I was eventually compelled to admit, yeah, that actually happened. Sure, I did talk to another girl, and a lot of other things she just wouldn't let go of. After she relentlessly pushed me and insisted that honesty was crucial for this to succeed, I ended up spilling all my private details, even though we were already broken up. Following this, she took it a step further, saying that simply sharing wasn't enough, and if I truly meant it, I had to marry her right then and there, or make her pregnant that night. She caught me off guard by suggesting we elope, even proposing that we could get someone she knew as a witness and use a quick venue. I did want to reconcile, but both options felt extremely rushed. I thought that maybe if we had intimacy, I could avoid getting her pregnant, just like it had always been the case. So within a week, I chose to engage in unprotected intimacy with her as an alternative to getting married. And that's how things unfolded. After that, everything started to go downhill. Firstly, she was against taking a pregnancy test. We had a bunch of extra pregnancy tests, and even though I knew it was too early, I jokingly suggested that she pee on one of them. She came up with a ton of excuses for not doing it until a month later. I sometimes wonder if she was worried she might already be pregnant. On another note, once my best friend learned that I was taking my relationship with her more seriously, he got upset with me and started giving me reasons why I should consider dating someone else instead. Then we found out that she was pregnant from that night, and she gave me an ultimatum. But overall, things seemed good, and I was happy with how they were going. However, her sisters started asking me strange questions like, "Why are you so nice to her?" And "Why are you still with her?" Her family seemed surprised that I was continuing to date her. That's when I started noticing red flags. Her sister began mentioning things that she shouldn't have known about, like my best friend's nickname, the type of car he drives, and some of the music he liked. I asked her how she knew him, and she proceeded to tell me stories about how he frequented their house a lot. She described a time when they walked in on him licking her chest, and how she and my girlfriend stayed up late discussing how my best friend was so desperate to be with my girl that he even performed BJ on her to persuade her to have intimacy. I didn't want to believe it, but I started keeping track of everything she said. I observed things for months, and slowly everything started becoming clear. Learning about all this made me feel depressed, and I ended up drinking more than usual during her pregnancy. I hadn't confronted her about it yet, but it seemed like she could sense that something was about to blow up. I began asking vague questions and watched her squirm as she told lies. Then I'd witness one lie leading to another lie, trying to cover up the truth. She'd keep lying to me as if I had no clue. She'd look me right in the eyes and lie convincingly. My so-called best friend, who used to be quiet around me, couldn't even muster an apology when I confronted him. He just stayed silent, avoiding my gaze. As it turned out, he was the one feeding her information about my personal life that I had shared with him in confidence, all in an attempt to make her dislike me. The two people I trusted the most betrayed me, and the worst part is, they both teamed up against me. Now I'm stuck dealing with this overly apologetic woman who's raising my child. I'm also stuck with this lingering trauma that's made me reluctant to form new friendships or spend quality time with anyone because I fear getting hurt again by building connections. It's hard to trust people these days. I think the trauma has affected both of us. Because she cheated and lied to me repeatedly, it seems like she assumes I'm doing the same. Despite enduring all the pain and difficulties, I've remained completely faithful. Yet I'm the one constantly on the defensive, facing groundless accusations. It seems like every other day, a new insecurity arises, and our arguments escalate to yelling, cursing, and slamming doors. My patience with her insecurities is wearing thin, and I've even reached a breaking point where I've cried, punched a wall, and injured my hand. I've never been aggressive before. I was shocked at how I lost control. I love my son deeply, and I can see that he's happiest when he sees his mom and me getting along. He's perceptive and knows when things are going well between us. Capito. There are days when I try to avoid unnecessary fights with her by going for a drive, but when I return, the baby seems upset and only wants his mom. It feels like if we split up, it'll definitely affect him. However, if we stay and keep arguing all the time, we'll just set a bad example for him. It's painful, even though I hate admitting it. She really pushed me to come clean before we decided to have a baby, but she never opened up herself. She never confessed that she was sneaking around with my best friend behind my back. And when I confronted her about it, she says, "I loved you so much that I did what I thought was necessary to keep us together. Sorry for loving you too much." Now she's saying we need to stay together for the sake of the baby, and that it's also the best choice for us. Sometimes it feels like I might have a heart attack from the dramatic and pointless arguments we have. It's kind of laughable, really. I'm trying my best to provide her with a good life, working and paying for everything while she stays home. But it doesn't bring me any satisfaction. It's like I'm doing this to prevent her and the baby from being hurt. That's when I start wondering why people resort to cheating. Feeling trapped with no way out, yet unable to stay in. Ellie and I met in college and instantly clicked. When we started dating, I wasn't very assertive. It was her interest and desire in me that helped me value myself more and overcome my insecurities. I was just a hard-working, nerdy guy who hadn't had much luck with women, so I was amazed that someone as smart and beautiful as Ellie was interested in me. Both of us were ambitious, and we each built our own small businesses by the time we graduated from college. After graduation, we moved in together and got married a year later. Our marriage felt very strong to me. We faced family tragedies, professional challenges, and various disagreements, but we always worked through them, and I believed it made us stronger. Ellie had a large social circle that included many men, but it never concerned me because she didn't do anything suspicious. All social outings seemed to be with a mix of friends, and I trusted her closest friends. As our 10-year anniversary approached, I decided to discuss the topic of starting a family. Early in our relationship, we compromised on the size of our family. I wanted kids, and she wanted none or at most one, so we agreed on having one child. Now, 10 years into our marriage, feeling economically secure and thinking our relationship was healthy, I brought up the topic. I can't help but wonder if my bringing up this subject triggered the chain of events that followed. A little over 3 months ago, she told me she was going out with her friends to have some fun. She explained that she needed to unwind because she was getting stressed about me asking about having kids again. That night, she returned home at 4 a.m., and from that day on, our bedroom became completely dormant. In our relationship, Ellie had always initiated closeness, as much as I did, if not more. On average, I'd say she initiated more often than me. Even during rare periods when we were dealing with travel, I can't recall us going more than 5 days without some form of closeness. She starts going out more, becoming protective of her phone, and avoiding me. things I had never seen from her before. After about 3-4 weeks of this, I talked to my best friend Omar, and he directs me to Reddit, where I start reading about similar situations. Eventually, I realize I need to do something about this because it's affecting my mood. I don't just want to trust her. I like trusting my wife, but now I feel the need to trust her. Reluctantly, I decide to check her calls and texts on her phone, feeling like a complete monster for violating her privacy. I discover that one of the new people in her social circle is an old high school flame from before we were together. The more I investigate, the more I uncover. I believe the fact that I had always trusted her completely made her complacent about hiding the affair better. I discovered that during that party a month ago he attended, and they spent the whole night catching up and ended up kissing, not even bothering to hide it from their friends, conveniently going to the bathroom together. Up until this point, I had been feeling a huge pit of anxiety in my stomach, trying to hold on to the image of the woman I thought I had married, fooling myself in a way. But now, the anger and sadness became overwhelming, especially since she seemed oblivious to my sudden indifference. She didn't notice that I had stopped making romantic gestures, and I felt like I was falling apart inside. Finally, a month ago, I decided to catch them in the act. I told Ellie I was going to visit my cousin for the weekend, who lives 3 hours away, but instead, I stayed with Omar, who has been helping me record and copy everything. I waited and yep, she brought him to our house, to our bed. I sneaked into the house, made my way to our room, and the sounds left no doubt. They were so into it, they didn't even notice me standing there at the door, recording them with my phone. It felt like something inside me just shattered, like my soul snapped so hard I could hear it. My veins turned icy cold, and it felt like a massive weight had been dropped on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I went numb. The next part is kinda hazy, to be honest. According to Omar, who I had brought as a witness, it seems I walked up to them, pulled the guy off the bed, and then Omar had to pull me off of him. I vaguely remember Omar holding me down on the ground. After that, there was the usual chaos of getting caught. I decided to cut off all contact for 5 weeks and started working with a lawyer, preparing for the worst. Omar acted as her go-between during that time because I just couldn't bring myself to talk to her. And you know what? Ellie reached out to my family and told them that we are having problems. Yeah, right. After the 5 weeks of not contacting each other, we finally met and talked. She was sorry and took full responsibility for her actions, saying it wasn't my fault. We decided to give marriage counseling a try to see if there's any hope of salvaging our relationship. It's hard to believe, but even after everything, I still love her. I hate myself for caring about her well-being and happiness, and now I'm questioning our whole relationship. Has she been cheating before and I just didn't see it or chose to ignore it because I trusted her too much? Update. After reading all the responses and messages, I took the weekend to think it all over and made up my mind. I realized that I couldn't live with myself if I stayed with her. Trying to work it out would mean sacrificing my self-respect. I also didn't want to be in a relationship where I had to constantly be on the lookout for betrayal. So, I decided to end it all. Here's how it happened. On Monday, I woke up to a surprising sight. My Johnson was at full attention, something that hadn't happened since I found out about Ellie's affair. It was like my body was saying, we're going to end this today and move on to something new. I even laughed about it, and Omar and his wife came to check on me, thinking I was having a breakdown. I got up, got ready, and called Ellie's dad to set up a talk. We met about an hour before our marriage counseling session. Surprisingly, I felt calm on the drive there, though deep down, emotions were still swirling inside me. We met at a cozy breakfast place near his house and sat down. Ellie's dad is a good man, lighthearted, funny, and level-headed. I thanked him for how he and his wife treated me all these years and apologized for having to have this talk with him. He listened patiently, but as I explained why I was going to divorce his daughter, he looked down, and I could sense his disappointment and anger, not at me, but at Ellie. He told me he understood, and I asked him not to tell Ellie as I was going to talk to her soon. He agreed, we shook hands, and he wished me well. It hurt to shatter his image of her. I wondered if I should have asked him to take care of her, but I reminded myself that he's her dad, and of course, he'll care for her. It's no longer my responsibility to look after her. She's a grown woman now. After that, I headed to our scheduled marriage counseling session. I spent all day on Sunday practicing what I would say to Ellie and how to say it. I wanted to make sure my emotions wouldn't take over during the conversation. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and prayed, something I hadn't done in a while since this all started. When we sat down for the session, Ellie was wearing one of the dresses I used to love seeing her in. For a brief moment, I almost forgot everything. But then the strong disgust and anger took over, and any attraction I had faded away. I let the counselor begin like in our previous sessions, but after about 10 minutes of them talking, I interrupted. Excuse me, I have a few things I need to say to Ellie, and I wanted to say them here with a neutral third party. If I'm interrupted at any point, I will simply leave, and that's it. Ellie, I've had some realizations and I want to express them. I don't feel the need to know if this was the only time you cheated, because it doesn't change things for me. Knowing how long it went on or how many times it happened won't make a difference either. Even if there was a so-called good reason behind it, the why doesn't change the fact that it happened. The important thing here is that you did cheat. These are the facts that matter to me now. It's evident that you never wanted to have children with me. At this, Ellie opens her mouth to interject, and I started walking to the door, so she immediately backed off. You were going to string me along for however long it would take. You were going to cheat on me sooner or later. This is when the waterworks started to open up for her. I've felt so disrespected and unloved by your actions. The counselor begins to look like she is about to interject, and I respond by taking another step towards the door, which ends that. I want you to understand that my lawyer is already filing for divorce, and your father now knows the entire truth of what has been happening. Don't contact me anymore. From now on, our only communication will be through our lawyers. These are our final words to each other. Goodbye. I walked to the door and left. As soon as I closed the door, I heard her wailing loudly. She rushed out of the office trying to stop me, apologizing and begging for a second chance, saying we can start a family. She was crying hysterically the whole time. I managed to push past her and get in my car. The emotions I had been suppressing started to overwhelm me, and I was barely holding it together. I drove to my parents' house and sent the planned text message to Ellie's best friend's husbands. When I got home, my dad was at the store, but my mom could tell something was wrong with me. She's always been able to read me like a book. I told her and Dad that I needed to share something important, so we sat down and waited. About 30 minutes later, Dad arrived. I poured everything out, and with each word, it felt like an ocean of emotions was emptying, and all the pain was pouring out of me. When I finished talking to my dad, he just held me, and I cried into his shirt for a solid 20 minutes. When it all ended, I felt drained, but also strangely at peace. I've arranged for Omar to receive a Harley he's been eyeing for a while. He's been more than a friend to me, and I want to be as good a friend to him as he has been to me. I can't wait to see his face when he gets it. I think this will be my last post because it's the end of this story. I want to thank all of you. I never thought I'd find such sound and sane advice from strangers on the internet. I know there's a long road ahead, and I'll still need individual counseling to deal with the aftermath of this debacle and rebuild my ability to trust. I have to hope that little by little, all this pain, sadness, and anger will go away, like Roto-Rooter for my soul, if I do the work. Now, the rest of my life begins, and I can honestly say I'm looking forward to it. Story 2. My wife and I, both 37 years old, have been married for 12 years, and we've been together for 16 since we met in college. We have a 6-year-old kid, and we recently bought our first house after saving for a long time. While our relationship has had its ups and downs, we've managed to make it last. I'm not even sure what to consider D-Day anymore. The truth is so unclear. Was it the first time I suspected something was going on months ago? Or was it last week, last night, or perhaps even today? Maybe D-Day was last year. It began like these things usually do, my wife staying up late on her phone texting someone. It seemed a bit odd to me, as she had been secretive about her phone, but I had a chance to check it while she was in the shower. I discovered she was flirting quite openly with a coworker named Jack Harkness. It seemed like a new friendship, but it was more daring and even suggestive than I was used to from her. I confronted her about it, and she got defensive, saying it was just a coworker, and she didn't think she did anything wrong. She got mad at me for snooping. A week later, while my wife is getting ready in the morning, her locked phone on the nightstand receives a notification from Jack at 5 in the morning. I don't want to wake up my son, so I avoid confronting her. Confrontation is not my strong suit anyway. Later that afternoon, I talk to my therapist about it, and he advises me to confront her and ask about it. He suggests I ask to see her phone. So, when she gets home, I ask her to show me her phone. She refuses, claiming her right to privacy. I question her about whether she's been talking to Jack, and she says he messaged her maybe 2 or 3 times. I insist on seeing the messages. She denies anything significant is going on and suggests I need help to overcome my suspicions. I tell her I will seek help, but first I want to see her phone. Eventually, she agrees. It turns out there have been 100 messages exchanged over the last 2 weeks, more than she initially admitted, though they seem innocent. Nevertheless, the fact that she lied bothers me. We decide to go to counseling again. We had gone previously when our child was born for about 6 months. The counselor outlines a plan for reconciliation, but it requires my wife to cut off communication with Jack and my commitment to take divorce off the table. However, my wife claims she doesn't like the counselor anymore, and we never return to therapy. Perhaps D-Day was last week. My wife spends the morning texting her friends, and I notice her unlocked PIN. My suspicions continue to bother me, and I can't shake it off. I get a brief moment when she leaves her phone unattended, and I unlock it. I see that she's still texting him, but now his name is listed as Harkness J. I don't have enough time to read the messages. I confront her and ask if she's still talking to Jack. She admits that she is, claiming they are just friends, and since I never asked her not to talk to him, given they work together, she doesn't think there's an issue. I don't request to see the messages, and she doesn't offer. At this point, would it even make a difference? Will it help? Maybe D-Day was last night. All day yesterday, she seemed upset and avoided me. Last night while she's asleep, I take her phone from the nightstand. I feel my heart pounding with fear. What if she wakes up? Why am I snooping? What am I hoping to find? I'm filled with shame and anxiety. I attempt to enter the PIN, but it's incorrect. Her new PIN is longer now. At this point, I decide to sleep on the couch. When she wakes up and comes downstairs, she asks if everything is okay. I tell her I have a headache, which is true, and I'm feeling nauseous, also true. She questions if I have a fever, and I assure her I don't. It's just a sinus headache. She wants me to come back to bed and asks what's bothering me. I tell her that I think she's having an affair. She denies it, saying she would never do that. Then she asks if it's about that other guy, and I question why she flirts with him. Her response is that it's just fun, and that's where the conversation ends. My headache overwhelms me, and I tell her I want to sleep. I guess today is D-Day. I'm so tired, both emotionally and physically. I'm exhausted from the slow trickle of half-truths. I'm tired of dealing with the drama surrounding her cell phone. I'm worn out from the constant paranoia, always feeling like I'm only half right, and ending up feeling like a jerk. I don't know what to say when she gets home. Confrontation is not my strong suit. I just want to put an end to this nightmare. Update. I talked to my wife and let her know that I'm ready to move on and want a divorce. She tried to downplay her relationship with her coworker, saying it's ridiculous to want a divorce over that. She offered to show me the text messages between them, but I was doubtful about their authenticity. It's easy to delete messages these days, especially if they're not regular SMS texts from the carrier, and these weren't. The messages I saw were not too scandalous, but still not appropriate. She messaged him multiple times, and he was persistently flirtatious, even over innocent things. On Thanksgiving Day, she texted him, "The turkey is in the oven," and he replied, "That's so hot." Another time, about a week ago, she texted him close to bedtime, saying she was going to have another drink because it had been a long day, and he responded, "I am so turned on right now. I'm feeling frustrated because I'm stuck in a strange place right now. There's evidence of inappropriate behavior, and she's been hiding this relationship and gaslighting me. However, what I've seen isn't necessarily concrete proof. The texts are inappropriate, but not explicitly, and they don't entirely make sense in context. While there's nothing explicit from her end, she also wasn't shutting down his advances. She pleaded with me to change my mind, but I refused. She begged me once more, And again, I declined. I remained resolute. She begged me repeatedly, at least a dozen times. Finally, she asked for just 2 counseling sessions. At that moment, I gave in. I said, "All right, we'll do a couple of sessions, but if I'm not convinced that we can make it work, I'm ending things." Update. As I mentioned before, my wife asked me to reconsider and attend marriage counseling. I agreed, but mainly because I needed some time to think about my next steps. Meanwhile, I've been active on this subreddit, trying to support others while also sorting out my own thoughts. My wife has been acting like everything is normal. She's been very affectionate, constantly wanting to kiss and cuddle, but I feel frustrated and declined her advances. During our arguments about the issue, when I told her that I think she's cheating on me and she asked why, I mentioned the lies, the deleted messages, and how she's treating the privacy of her friendship with this person as sacred. She got upset, feeling insulted and not understanding why I can't trust her. She cried and said she didn't deserve to be treated this way. Since I don't have concrete evidence of anything beyond an emotional affair, I felt I had to give my wife a chance to come clean and work on reconciliation. I came up with 2 simple requirements for me to stay and work with the marriage counselor. Stop communicating with the other person involved in the affair. Agree to unlock her phone and let me see all the messages exchanged between her and him. At first, she agreed to both conditions. However, she has since changed her stance. She is still texting with him, claiming it's just friendly, but she won't allow me to see the messages or anything else on her phone. On Friday, I contacted a divorce lawyer, and I have a meeting scheduled for the end of the month. I was hoping to gather evidence of something more than just flirtatious text messages. In my state, being at fault matters during separation, so that could be helpful. I'm considering discussing the situation with the AP's spouse, although I don't have concrete proof of inappropriate behavior between my wife and her husband. It's more like, look, they're being inappropriate. But maybe it's worth telling her. I'm ready to move on. This marriage seems beyond repair. Update. After my last update, I received feedback suggesting that I should be more straightforward with my spouse about the situation. I have already contacted a lawyer, and we're currently working on the divorce paperwork. In the meantime, I decided to reach out to the AP's spouse and share only the known truth with her. I wanted to let her draw her own conclusions and avoid any potential legal issues from the AP for slander. The other spouse reacted wonderfully. She took the news seriously and with concern for my situation. She admitted feeling nervous and unsure about how to handle it. She said she would talk to her husband, and I wished her well. Of course, my wife found out about this, and she was furious. She accused me of ruining their marriage, destroying her friendship, and even threatening her job. She claimed not to recognize me anymore and expressed serious concern about my mental health. Throughout this process, I've remained very calm and have been practicing the Divorce 180 approach. I told her that I feel fine and understand her anger, but there's nothing more to discuss. I did what I did, and I can't change the past. Not that I want to. She has come home from work in tears, saying there are rumors circulating at her workplace. She blames me for the rumors, even though I haven't spoken to anyone at her job about our situation. If there are rumors, they must be coming from the AP. She should be angry with him. She also told me that she spoke with the AP and that they plan to reconcile their marriage and be okay. She asked me not to talk to the AP's spouse anymore. Now that we're fully committed to getting a divorce, she has become petty and vindictive. She calls me names like an a-hole and accuses me of being lazy, apathetic, and a liar. She claims that she was the only one who truly cared in the marriage and makes me feel like a monster for supposedly breaking up the AP's marriage, even though she contradicted herself earlier. At this point, the AP's spouse sent me one last message saying, "If I had seen what you saw, I would have told you too. You don't need to apologize for anything." I have decided to keep these messages as evidence for my divorce lawyer. Overall, I feel like I'm handling this situation quite well. My wife's true colors are showing, and that makes it easier for me to proceed with the divorce. However, I expect the divorce process itself to be challenging. She's trying to manipulate and gaslight me, attempting to make me look like a terrible person. In response, I'm staying patient and perceptive, which seems to deflate her ego. The more she behaves this way, the more determined I am to pursue the divorce. Instead of wasting my energy trying to make her happy, I'm focusing on building a stronger relationship with my son, which has been very fulfilling. I'm mentally exhausted from all the lies and denials. The thought of spending the holiday season with a bitter spouse doesn't excite me, but I know this phase will pass eventually. Since my last post, things have been a whirlwind of craziness and chaos. If you're dealing with an emotionally offensive spouse, I recommend reading the article, Mine Duck Has Three Stations. Just today, my wife's emotions have been all over the place. She went from being fine with the divorce but blaming me for telling the AP's spouse, to suggesting cohabitation after the divorce for the sake of our child, to asking if I would reconsider the divorce, and then back to claiming she was the only one trying to work on the marriage. She's also concerned about how we'll handle the financial aspect. It's been a lot to handle in just one day. Update. A couple of weeks ago, I informed my wife that I want a divorce, and my decision remains firm. We have a 6-year-old son, and I'm now researching co-parenting to ensure I'm there for him and his needs. My wife has repeatedly asked me to reconsider, suggesting there might be something worth saving in our marriage, and accusing me of selfishly tearing the family apart. However, recently, she proposed a different approach. She asked me to reconsider the divorce, not for the purpose of reconciling our relationship, but to raise our son together while living in the same house, even though we wouldn't be a couple anymore. She referred to it as a parenting marriage. I have reservations and concerns about this idea. I worry it could lead to financial complications once we eventually decide to get divorced. Also, if I were to start a new relationship, it might be uncomfortable for someone new to have me living with my ex-spouse, even if it's just in a co-parenting setup. Additionally, I fear that this arrangement might not grant me the level of independence I desire in my life and in caring for our son. Our past issues regarding parenting and communication won't magically disappear just because we label ourselves as divorced. I'd appreciate any thoughts on this matter. I've only found articles from marriage counselors praising the parenting marriage technique, and I haven't come across any downsides mentioned. Every day, she keeps begging me to reconsider. I've been distant and unresponsive because some of her behavior has been terrible. She even came up to me holding our family photo from last Christmas, asking, "Isn't this worth it?" But it's important to note that she hasn't apologized for her actions. According to her, she did nothing wrong. Still, I'm trying to remain emotionally detached. She's been ignoring my request to go to mediation for the separation agreement, or let my lawyer handle it. In our state, there are 2 paths to divorce, either through a separation agreement or living apart for 1 year. We're still living together because I'm the one paying the mortgage. Today, she told me she'll sign the separation agreement, but on the condition that I allow her to tell our son that I am the one responsible for the divorce. I don't think that kind of condition can even be part of the agreement. Isn't this a manipulative move on her part? What should I do now? Our first talk about divorce was in June. I expressed my desire to end the marriage, but she asked for time to reconsider. After more evidence of her behavior came to light, I had the second talk right after Thanksgiving, making it clear that I'm done and want a divorce. I reached out to a lawyer, and so did she. However, the divorce process has now stalled. In Maryland, without a separation agreement, the only option for divorce is to live apart for 1 year. On Monday, my wife dropped a bombshell on me. She insisted on a separation agreement, but with the condition that I tell our 7-year-old son that I wanted to leave and wasn't willing to fix things. I told her it wasn't appropriate to have that conversation with him. Last night we talked again. She now says she'll agree to the separation agreement only if we go to 3 months of couples therapy because she needs to know the why of the divorce. I've been clear about what went wrong, including the lying and emotional affair. However, she doesn't think those are good enough reasons. I've also been discussing with my individual therapist the patterns of offense in our relationship, and honestly, there's no chance of me returning to this marriage. I suggested a compromise, agreeing to couples counseling after the agreement is in place. I thought it would give her closure. I need the security of the document first, so I can freely express myself in therapy without her manipulating the process. She called this unfair, believing that the money spent on drafting the agreement could be used for therapy to save the marriage. Do I need to leave now? The original plan was for me to keep the house since I can afford the mortgage. I'm considering moving to an apartment in my son's school district and offering to pay half of the bills on the current house until we can sell it if it comes to that. My soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXW, and I are separating. She's been hesitant to work on a separation agreement, saying she needs more time to think. It's been over 6 months now, and she's been focused on reconciling, while I've been hoping she would change her mind. Recently, my lawyer pushed me to take action. We have a school-aged child, which makes things more complex. We currently own a home we bought 2 years ago. We're both on the title, but I'm the only one on the mortgage loan. I cover the mortgage and all household bills. She earns 6 figures but only pays for groceries and health care. But with estimated child support, I won't be able to afford the mortgage and save enough. So I've started looking at apartments and reached out to a realtor. However, I can't move out until we have a signed separation agreement with a custody plan. I want to start selling the home, but she refuses to sell it right now because she's not ready to leave. Yesterday, she requested a discussion about the finances of me keeping the house after separation. She wanted to review my income and the mortgage to explore options. I declined, stating that she has no right to dictate my living arrangements post-separation. This made her cry, claiming she's doing what's best for our child. I feel stuck. I can't leave, I can't stay, and I can't sell the house. I spoke to my lawyer, and she'll prepare a separation agreement. But if my wife refuses to sign, I'm uncertain about my next steps. I'm still going through a separation with my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXW, which I initiated months ago. I can't move out of the house until I have a signed custody agreement. My plan is to leave in March. Sunday night, my wife installed security cameras inside the house, which record 24/7 to an external device. I noticed them on Monday and put them away. She reinstalled them overnight. Today, I removed them again and informed her in writing that I object to being recorded, as our state, Maryland, requires consent from both parties for audio recording. She claimed they were set to only record video, not audio. The cameras don't belong to my wife, they belong to a friend of hers. The friend asked me to return them to my spouse, so I did. I'm worried about this situation. I don't want to be recorded, and I fear it might be used against me in some way. Currently, I work from home while my first grader son does distance learning. In my state, dealing with divorce and custody is challenging. They prefer parents not to divorce, so they make it complicated. There are 2 paths for divorce, a contested one requiring a year of separation, and an uncontested one needing a signed separation agreement, which is faster if both parties agree. I can't move out of the house without having some custody arrangement in place. Now, it's almost a year into the divorce, and my ex is prolonging the separation agreement process, adding unreasonable custody demands and not making decisions about the house. I'm unsure if she wants to sell it or buy me out of it. Because she's delaying the separation agreement, I've considered filing for a contested divorce, but even then, due to COVID, the next custody hearing date wouldn't be for 4-5 months. So I'm stuck here, as long as she wants, and I hate it. I feel stuck. I want to leave, but I'm afraid it might affect my custody situation. I'm exhausted from being the one paying all the bills, especially when she earns as much as I do. I'm tired of constantly being criticized by her for everything I do. She tells me that all my efforts are wrong, and she even calls me unattractive, lazy, and uncaring. I'm just really worn out.